Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show. I'm coming to you from the North Shore of Oahu, where weekly I interview some of the world's most inspiring people from business, philanthropy, and entertainment. I love collecting humans, and these are some of my favorites I've found along the way. This podcast is brought to us by Capita Financial Network.
Do you need help with the next steps of your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call or schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hi, Greg. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on our show. I'm so thrilled to meet you and be able to speak with you today. And I'm so excited to hear all about your business and your life. And thank you for making the time for us.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, Greg Tunney is our guest today, and he's had an incredible career in apparel. And he's got a company that when I first saw your brand, I just geeked out because I was saying I'm such a big fan of Native American culture and art, and you guys have basically turned the moccasin into the coolest thing ever. And I'd love to hear your story about. First of all, tell us a little bit about you and your background, and then kind of a little introduction. I love to have my guests kind of share their snapshot of their bio a little bit before we even get started. Is that all right? Maybe share a little bit about you. That'd be great.
Sure. No, I'd be glad to. So, I'm one of those strange ones. Went to college at BYU and then went away to the East Coast for about 40 years. I've been the president and CEO of two different publicly held companies over the last 20 years. Also was the global brand president for Wolverine Worldwide, which has 12 brands, including brands like Merrill and Saucony and Keds and all that other good stuff. And also worked with Blackstone Private Equity, the largest private equity company in the world, and have always really been, I hate to use the term, always been kind of a shoe dog, but over those years, most of those brands had footwear, apparel, and accessories. I've been in the fashion and function area of those for the last 25 years.
That's amazing. And tell us about how you ended up being the CEO and president of Manitoba, which is just so exciting.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Up until COVID, I was one of those guys that wore a blue suit, white shirt, red tie every day. Went into the office, kind of that corporate thing, being part of publicly held companies. And when COVID happened, I was at Wolverine at the time as the global president. You got to realize that Wolverine, we were in 122 countries with our brands. So it was really a great experience and great immersion as far as global branding. I'm kind of one of those ones that believe that if you're going to be a brand, if you're not a global brand, you're not really a brand in today's marketplace. So when COVID took place, I got a call on a Friday morning in Michigan in our offices, and they said, by the way, we're shutting the whole office down at the end of the day. Had our executive committee, and they said, oh, and by the way, you can go live anywhere you want. At that time, you got to realize, being in 122 countries, I had been using Zoom for about 5 years. So it was very common for us to have all of our meetings virtual to meet with all of our partners on a regular basis. So I called my wife up and said, hey, you know that snow cabin we have up in Park City? Let's get tickets tonight and go there, and we'll stay there during COVID. And what happened was during that time in COVID, we found out we just absolutely loved Park City. And at the end of it, when they said it's time to come back to Michigan, I said, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
And it's a new world out there. So I was kind of a free agent consulting for a lot of different people. And somebody came to me and they had an opportunity. And I said, I'd love to be part of this opportunity. I felt like I was at a point in my career I really wanted to give back. And I said, I only have one requirement. I have to live out of Park City. And they said, that's great. You can be the CEO and live out of Park City. So we have an office in Park City, and we have an office in Winnipeg, Canada, as our international office. So for the last 2 years, I've been commuting back and forth with our teams, and we are actually a work from home first organization. So everybody in our company works from home. We do meet on a regular basis, monthly as well as quarterly. We feel that it helps us kind of have more continuity and better collaboration if we can meet. In fact, last week I was in Boston at a product meeting with our team. And so I'm a big believer that there is no one zip code that has all the talent, but if you took the whole world, there's more talent in those zip codes. And so we have people in different countries. We have people in 6 different time zones. It's a much different world than what I grew up with, but I really like it and like what it represents to our organization.
That's amazing. And I can totally relate to you as a global consultant who's had clients all over the world that basically been working remote for 10 years. It's interesting to see the world catch up with the process that some of us digital nomads, have been able to utilize. And there's different etiquette and different, opinions and, all kinds of different ideas about how to go about being remote, but it's definitely enabled, as you said, probably above all else, to have a global pool of talent and relationships that span such a vast degree of expertise. It's so cool. So I love that. So I don't know if you knew this, Greg. I grew up in the Park City area and I'm originally from there. I
Oh,
live now on the North Shore of Oahu, but
okay.
so that's home to me, that part of the world. So I'm so thrilled to hear you fell in love with it. All of the world flooded to from New York and LA and San Francisco, like they flooded to Park City area. In fact, that's like what ended up getting me and my family in Oahu is somebody knocked on our door and wanted to buy our home when it wasn't on the market kind of thing.
Right.
So we ended up kind of being in that 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 incredible, impetus of people coming in. But yeah, this brand, tell me a little bit about Manitoba because, you know, um, the story, the history behind how it got started. And I've been such a fan of indigenous culture and art, but I know that in today's conversation, there's a big discussion about cultural appropriation, about, all of these things. I'd love for you to share the nuances of some of that. Those are important discussions to be having. I have many friends that are artists of, who have different feelings. They have a different spectrum of feelings. Just it's not unanimous amongst the community about, as indigenous artists, how they feel that it should go about. Some are honored that it's taking off. Some are thrilled that people are incorporating their culture. And some feel very differently. And I'd love to hear what you guys have done to address that, how you approach that and the process and the story and history and origin of your business.
Yeah, I grew up in the Southwest in Arizona, so I grew up with indigenous communities and very familiar with them. And it's interesting as you go up to Canada, they have a much different approach there. They're actually, believe it or not, quite far behind the United States as far as our reconciliation with indigenous communities. And so it's been interesting. They have up there 600 different bands of indigenous communities. And our founder was a gentleman by the name of Sean McCormick, and he's Métis. And 25 years ago, his father was a trapper. And so he was followed his father. He was
Wow.
trapping. He was tanning leather. And someone once came into him and said, "Hey, your family knows how to bead and make moccasins. If you guys would take this leather and tanning and things you're doing and make moccasins, we would buy them." And thus, a company was started 25 years ago. And,
Wow.
and so it's a real story. It's not made up on Madison Avenue. Uh, Sean
Love
is
that.
Sean is our chief impact officer today. And Sean, I would say, when it came to social impact and culture appropriations and everything else, I would say that he was probably 25 years ahead of his time. Um,
Wow.
and they have really done it right in that there isn't anything that we make that doesn't have an indigenous artist at the heart of it. Um,
Great.
and everything that we do is the right way. So believe it or not, we have a lot of companies out there that actually contact us and say, "How do you do this right?"
Yeah.
Because people
Yeah.
know that they're doing it wrong. So, for example, one of our competitors is they. I think people think they're a competitor of ours, but they're not really. But Minnetonka Moccasins. Um,
Mm.
it's a family. It's a business that's actually owned by a Jewish family, and they have been doing things that are just really horrendous culture appropriations that are not right. But they weren't aware of it.
Mm,
And so they
mm,
actually came to us and said, "Hey, how do we do this and reconcile this and make it right
mm,
forward?" So there's people that have reached out to us to say, "We want to do this right. How do we do it right?" Park cities are probably a pretty good example. As you know, Park City has literally 100 different art galleries, right? And they have
yeah.
beautiful paintings of indigenous life and life on the prairies and everything else. And when you go in there and say, "Hey, I'd like to buy a painting," is any of them done by an indigenous artist? Never. It's either a
Mm-mm,
European artist or an Asian artist.
mhm.
And the funny thing is like they're not even aware of what they're doing, that
Yeah.
they're literally stealing this art. And so we think one of our responsibilities is that we don't own moccasin making. That came from our elders that, centuries ago, and that we don't own it. But our job is to really make people aware of it and make sure
Mm.
that we're doing the right things for the community and keeping beading and moccasin making alive.
Oh, it's such a beautiful culture, and there's so much story and intricacies. The design and the symbolism is so profound, and I think that's so wonderful to hear, and actually makes me really proud of that group that reached out to you, the humility to as a competitor to reach out to you and say, "We're messing up." I think that's a big part of at least what my indigenous friends have shared. They just really like to see the sincerity of people saying, "I wanna do better." And, I love that you have that sincere origin story, and, that's so great that Sean's still a leader in the company and shaping the vision and the narrative and the purview of where you guys go. So, are you finding that, in this world of fast fashion and e-commerce or, with we just recently had because your stuff is much more, quality, it's much higher end, it's
Yep.
stuff that would last like generations, you could
Yep.
pass these moccasins down to your grandkids literally, um, which I think is so cool. Do you find that, people are really respecting the fact that you guys are not just kind of, something that's, will fall apart and be thrown away in a season or whatever? I mean, do you find that there's, that in the apparel world you have such experience in, is this a horse of a different color, so to speak, what you're doing with Manitoba?
Yeah, I went from mass manufacturing to micro manufacturing, but we have two parts of our business. So we have first and foremost an area that's called the indigenous marketplace. And in the indigenous marketplace, we provide a platform on e-commerce. People can buy from all over the world. In fact, we just had a couple weeks ago one of our most beautiful muckluck boots. It was over $1,500, and actually
Wow,
a gentleman out of East Berlin bought it. Okay. And because they want the real deal and they want the real authentic um,
yeah,
thing. And actually, when we send it to them, it tells them who the artist is, how they built it, and everything else. But
cool,
we have that marketplace, and that marketplace we have everything from moccasins to mucklucks to jewelry to you name it is on that marketplace. Our artists who create those, they get 100% of all the profit. We don't take a dime. Okay.
wow,
So that is one part of our business. And so if you want something made by Rosa, which is one of the top beaters in the world, you can get hers and it may be $1,000, but it can't be replaced. Um, and then we actually have what you would see in, say, a Nordstrom or a Dillard's or a normal
yeah,
department store. We have that, and that would be maybe a $200 or $300 version. And it's made in the best factories in the world in places like Vietnam. Believe it or not, the most technically advanced shoes are made in Vietnam. So if you look at Nike and Adidas, there's a reason why they're in Vietnam. Um, all
yeah,
of our all of our boots are waterproof, and waterproofing. Vietnam is one of the few places in the world that you can actually get 100% waterproofing done as well. So we have two
wow,
sides of our sides of our business.
cool,
And, so if anybody says, "Hey, I want the real deal. Are you doing the real deal?" Absolutely. And our
cool,
indigenous marketplace is alive and well. And it, it really means something to the artist. You got to realize for an artist to go sell a $1,500 boot online, they're feeding their family for a couple months because of that boot.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
s- it makes real impact and real social
incredible.
impact.
That's amazing, Greg. So, was that was that kind of the purview of your corporate social responsibility, that marketplace? Because taking no profit, how does this make sense for you guys? Yeah. Or
So this,
yeah,
so
where did
this
that
is
originate?
this is a really an interesting model. So when I got contacted by Endeavor Private Equity, they said, "Hey, we want to go buy this company. And by the way, Greg, there is a social impact side of it." So we sat down and really looked at it, and we said, "Hey, can we be one of those companies that actually do both? We do good in the community, but also do good economically." And what I found with social impact, if you don't make any money, it's hard to have a mission. So if you want
Yeah.
to support the mission, so we
Yeah.
actually have a couple different missions that we support. First and foremost, we support the indigenous marketplace that we give them back 100% of the profits. Another part that we have is called the Story Boot School. And the Story Boot School is something that you can sign up for college credit. You get to learn the history and the art of bead making, and you actually go to a class and you get to make your own bucklucks and moccasins and actually get college credit for it.
Mm.
And this brings the elders of the community together, and they actually get to tell their story and keep that alive in the marketplace. And we sponsor that 100%. We donate to
Wow.
that, and that is our part. The other part we have is economic sovereignty. And economic sovereignty is actually providing real jobs that provide real income that changes families' lives. So you got to realize right now, 59% of all of our employees are indigenous. Okay. So,
Wow.
so I'm the gringo of the company, but 59%. And so in many of these cases, we are changing what may have been a life cycle of poverty, whatever it may be.
Mm.
And this is usually the first time that someone has had a professional job making a sustainable living. And what we're seeing is not so much that we're changing their lives, but what we're really changing is the lives of their kids. Because now their kids are saying, I can go to school, I can go to college, I
Mm.
do have a family who can support me. And you got to realize in Winnipeg, where our corporate headquarters are, 23% of the entire population is indigenous. And in that indigenous community, they have the highest alcoholism, they have the highest unemployment rate, the
Mm.
highest poverty rates, et cetera, et cetera. So we are really changing the economic sovereignty for these people in Canada. And now we're starting to expand across to the United States as well.
That's so stunning. What an incredible, I guess just like I would be so proud for that platform to have that you have the majority of your employee base is indigenous, that you're creating this sustainable model for these families and these artists and for talent and for professionals. I just love what you guys are doing. What an incredible company. I'm so glad we could highlight what you're doing, Greg. I'm curious, like, what is the name of the marketplace, just so I make sure I understand it? Is it
Oh,
separate to
so
Manitoba, or you're
so
saying,
if you actually go onto our website, you can click onto it and you'll see
yeah,
the and you can go on to the website for the
okay,
Indigenous Marketplace. And then there's the Story Boot School, which has its own website that you can go to. And then economic sovereignty is we actually provide, we will be a B Corp this year. We actually submitted that application.
wow,
It will become a B Corp. So all of the information that I'm sharing with you, all those data points will be served up on our annual report that we.
wonderful.
And I think to your question that you're asking about, how does this work and how do you make money? And trust me, private equity people are not into the charity business,
Yeah.
and we don't believe we're
You
into
come
the.
from Blackstone. I mean, you
Yes,
wear this has got your hit your head, your heart, and your wallet in your world,
yes.
right?
So one of the things I want to make sure that people understand is this is where we think our model is different. There has been a significant shift in the consumerism in North America over the last 5 years. I grew up in the business where you could slap a label on anything, and if you price it at the right price and you put it in Kohl's or pennies or whatever, you could
Yeah.
sell, and it wasn't an issue.
Yes.
With the new millennials, with the new X, the Y, the Z generation, they are actually looking for brands that have a real purpose. And we
Mm.
actually have data that tells us 80% of those generations will actually pay at full price if they know the company is doing good and actually has a real social.
Mm.
Whereas when you get the baby boomers, 65% of all baby boomers are looking for something on sale. So it's a much different dichotomy of consumers out there. And what we find is when they learn about our story and they have an opportunity to buy our products, they will buy them. They will buy them at full price. They're not looking to buy them at J.C. Penney's. Nothing is J.C. Penney's. We're not in J.C. Penney's. But the fact of the matter is it really is a game changer, if you will, in the
That's
marketplace
incredible.
and making it a for profit organization.
That's a really stunning model. Like you said, it's unique and you're you're having to navigate a bunch of different worlds. And I love that, in the world of social impact where I've spent my career, um, there's always issues of, you know, how much can we make it so that all parties win? Like it's a win-win situation that investors see returns and, some people are critical of that. Hey, you can't actually make it doesn't do that much good and it doesn't make that much money. But that hasn't been my experience. I've seen an incredible my experience firsthand has been stunning, the impact that people can have when they have the mechanism of the free market and capitalism behind an incentive, dynamics. So I love that you guys have that. So Greg, like how do you find and how do you pick these incredible artisans? Like what's your guys' process to sourcing the best
So
talent from these
So,
communities?
yeah, so believe it or not, there are some major events. They call them, there's like the Great Southwest Powwow that takes place in Albuquerque and in Phoenix. And believe it or not, this indigenous artist community is a very close knit community. They know each other,
Mm,
and they want to come be part of us. They want to be one of our
mm,
artists. Um, and so we actually go to these big festivals, these big powwows, and we actually meet them. We have a person on our staff. Her name is Laura. She is Métis as well, and she actually goes to these festivals and she actually finds out whose artist is doing what, who specializes in a certain type of beading, who specializes in a certain type of art, and we actually go out and find them, and then we bring them into our organization. We found a person this year, Dwayne Dale. Dwayne Dale is Navajo. He's Dene. He's out of Mesa, and he put together a men's collection for us this year that has been absolutely stunning. But if you look at the art on the boot, it has these waves that have been done with stitching. But because
wow.
he comes from Mesa, Arizona, and he had that red stone and those red, desert scenes. That's what he was.
Yes.
And then his colors on the eyelets are all turquoise, which are all very indigenous to who he.
Beautiful.
And if
Yeah.
we ever tried to use like an American or somebody that was taught out of New York, they would never even think of those nuances. So
Right.
um, this
Right.
year, this year we brought on more indigenous artists than we have at any given time in the history of the company. Um, and just have a lot of collaborations going on right now. One that I'll give you a little buzz on that's kind of interesting is in November, we're doing a collab with Drake. And
Cool.
there'll be an all white moccasin, all white fur that he'll be launching in his stores, as well as us online. It'll be a
Very cool.
limited edition, but I never thought through this company that I would be meeting Drake and his
That's incredible. I love that you're working with, there's this celebrity component can really bring a spotlight and they can shed the amplification around this incredible art because ultimately they're artists, right? Like musicians like
absolutely.
Drake and actors are masters of their craft, and now they get to kind of geek out on other masters of the craft of this apparel. So that's really cool. It's all an expression of what's going on in our internal world and our culture really has come to really respect, I think, and love and cherish the uniqueness and the richness of indigenous design and art and apparel. So I think that's wonderful. That's so cool. Have fun.
Yeah. We have some, it'll be coming out next year, but we have some campaigns that we're looking at doing. Believe it or not, there are really some big Hollywood stars that have been very sensitive to the indigenous communities.
Mhm.
If you look at Matthew McConaughey, he's a big supporter of indigenous communities. Um,
Yes.
and I could keep going through the list, but we're actually looking at ones who really want to get involved with this and be part of it. And Believe it or not, they're not B stars. They're like A+ stars. Leonardo
Yes.
Leonardo DiCaprio, when he did his latest movie that got so much notoriety and he got his Oscar for, really played that indigenous, community part of it. And so we believe that there's opportunities to get those people engaged, and they want to be part of it.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think people want to do better. They want to cherish and amplify and heal and rectify what has been done. In that in our human nature, we're all just kind of horrified has happened, and historically and continues to happen today. So I'm really grateful for businesses like yours and leadership like yours, Greg. So tell me, Greg, like you, uh, as you're building this business, what are some our listeners, Capita Financial Network, which sponsors our show.
Mhm.
I'm the director of client relations there. We are constantly trying to find people of high capacity and high character who, of course, we're a full service wealth management company and we help manage their finances and help them achieve their goals and whatnot. But we are really big in relationship and understanding people and what drives people and building an ecosystem of relationships of trust. As you've been in business and had so much success in this world of apparel, and as you mentioned, building global brands in so many different countries and cultures, there's probably all kinds of different levers and hacks you have to use that are not analogous. Some things are just innately, this is how you do online marketing. But there's a lot of nuances that you have to understand. And curious what you would share is kind of some of the great takeaways of building a global brand and or helping tell the story well of your business. Because a lot of our listeners are business owners or investors in major businesses and, shareholders of the purview of wanting to get, as you mentioned, amplification around what they're trying to achieve as a brand. And I'd love your insights with all of your marketing background.
Yeah, I would tell you first and foremost, it started with Sean McCormick. He realized that the company had kind of reached its peak, if you will, with his talent and his background. He's from Manitoba. He's lived in Manitoba his whole life. And he was smart enough and pragmatic enough to say, hey, I've got to do something with somebody. One, first and foremost, to grow any business globally, you got to get the capital. So he was smart enough to go to private equity side. And then on the other side of it is to say, hey, I've got to get management in here and get out of their way and help them grow this into a global brand. And so we made some very conscious decisions early on. First and foremost, this idea about, remote first work environment. You might think about that and say, oh, that's just one of those things that make you feel good. No, it actually makes a big difference. We were able to get our CMO, our chief marketing officer, is a guy by the name of Aaron Carpenter. Aaron Carpenter was the CMO at North Face when they were at 500 million and took them to 1.5 billion. Okay. And
Incredible.
so he has an amazing capacity to understand big picture. How do you take a brand globally? And if we would have said, nah, everybody's got to be in Winnipeg, we never get an Aaron Carpenter, right? Uh,
Right.
Aaron, Aaron still lives in San Francisco. He lives in Silicon Valley. He ain't moving. But he has been really the driving force when you look at our creative and our messaging that's going out there. That's coming out with somebody like him. Our two people that are heading up product now, a guy by the name of Kitty Boulay and another guy by the name of Chris Paulus. They were both at Timberland for 23 years. If you took the two of them combined,
Wow.
I don't think you could find anybody in the US that has made as many boots as they have in the last 2 decades. And
Wow.
so part of bringing that global plan to life is actually getting people who have been exposed to global branding, who understand what it takes to do that versus being a regional or just a local brand. So we've been very fortunate to, our CFO came from Travis Matthews on the West Coast, and comes to us with an amazing background, and we just have a very eclectic group that this has allowed us to do this. And I would say the other thing is to be fair, is when I called Aaron the first time and said, "Hey, I'm working on this little project. You may not be interested." Um, when I tell them our story and what we're doing,
If yeah,
it's like Aaron said, I don't even care if I get paid. I just want to be part of this.
that is
Now
so
he gets
cool.
paid. He does get paid.
Of course, yes.
But
Hopefully
but
handsomely because, you hope you can reward people that are doing it for the right
yes,
reasons. I'd love
yes.
to see huge
Um,
success for and
so,
abundance around that.
So being able, our first and foremost focus has been on getting people who actually get the story and want to be part of it. If they just want
Yes.
it for another job or just another paycheck, we're the wrong company. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that's the biggest part of taking a global brand is really getting those disciplines, whether it's product, whether it's marketing, whether it's logistics, and getting those lined up so that you actually have a chance to take it more on a global scale.
That's incredible. Greg, I love it. I love that you guys are so on mission and that you have this vision and people, you're collecting the right hearts and the right minds
Yeah.
around that. In what have you learned kind of in leadership in terms of, again, even with the 59% employment of indigenous, which I think is so epic. You humbly mentioned, like, I'm the gringo and I'm at the top. Like, how do you navigate any of that stuff where, I mean, that's challenging, right? Like, like, I would imagine a sensitivity. I mean, I kind of always find myself just being like, man, I wish I knew all the ways to, like, help manage these expectations. I've worked in so many different projects around the world, and we're in third world countries doing humanitarian work, and we're trying to enable the local grassroots people to rise up and empower them in leadership. But we have a skill set to bring, and can't be unabashful about being like, yeah, this is where it might come from. This is my experience, the access and the resources and the levers that I have. Like, I can't pretend I don't have these, and I'm here to help you. Right? That other centric energy is pretty sincere, and I think people catch onto it. But do you have any tips about how to do that in your position?
Yeah, my career has been one of, usually if you call in Greg Tunney, it's usually because your company's going through a turnaround or a significant change. I don't get called in by Nike because they're doing so
Mm,
well. Okay. So I'm typically going in because either the company's decided to take a strategic change or there's trouble or whatever it may be. And the thing that I've learned is that quite frankly, nobody cares who Greg Tunney is. Nobody even cares about my background. What I've learned, the most important thing that I have to do, especially in this case of going into an indigenous culture and really trying to be embraced by it, is the first and foremost is you have to start to develop some type of trust. And that's what
yeah.
I've focused on is that I'm here for one reason and one reason only to make positive social impact with indigenous communities. And, all I can do, most people say, well, is that really what you're up to? Or are you up to something else? And all we can do is let the data speak for itself. So this year we hired more indigenous artists than they've ever had. This year we hit 59%
Yeah.
indigenous employee base that they've never hit before. We
Mhm.
actually have two indigenous board members. I would challenge you to find any private equity firm that has a board that has two indigenous board members.
Yeah.
Um, we right now, 67% of our company are female. Um, so,
Oh,
all we can do is show the facts and show the data. Instead
yeah.
of, when you start trying to pound your chest, people
Mm,
kind of, hey, you have a motive there? What is it? And
yeah.
so we just kind of let the data speak for itself and really focus on building trust. These are communities that have been broken for centuries. They've been exploited.
Mhm.
They've been taken advantage
Mhm.
of. And
Mhm.
even something as simple as you and I would say, "Oh, it's time to get the COVID shot." Think of an indigenous person that says, "Now, let me get this right. The colonists again want us to trust them, and I should take this shot." Um,
Yeah.
and
Right.
as you can imagine, there's a lot of sensitivity to that.
Of
And so,
course.
for me, it has been an amazing experience of things that we take for granted in regards to trusting people and everything else. Yet these people have been exploited, their lands have been stolen. The list goes on and on and on. And their children have been stolen from them. I mean, it's just
Mm.
horrendous. And
Yes.
yet people like us come in and say, "Oh, please trust us," and and
Right.
s- and so that to me has gone faster than I thought. It's not
Wonderful.
without its pain. It's not without your two steps forward, one step back. Um,
Yeah.
you make mistakes. I remember the first time that we had a group meeting, and in the United States, in the vernacular. it's very common to say, okay, let's all just get together and we'll have a little powwow. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
It was like, what are you saying? You can't, a powwow in
yeah.
Canada is a very sacred ceremony. Most of them go to it fasting. It's a cleansing process.
Wow.
Whereas in the States, they're more of a carnival, depending on what
Mhm,
tribe you're dealing with. And so,
mhm.
you look at that and you say, okay, lesson learned. And then you never make sure you never do it again.
Yeah,
But you don't know what you don't know. Um,
yeah.
so that to me has been the biggest part, whether it's with this group, whether it's when I went to Bangor, Maine, to shut down domestic manufacturing or other jobs that I've had in my career. It's about developing and being transparent and developing trust with teams and people.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
once you get the trust down, everything else is, I hate to say this, it's not easy, but it's all doable. You need to
mhm,
fix the balance sheet, doable. You need to fix the P&L statement, doable. But if you don't have trust, if you don't have that um, connectivity, it really slows down the process. So we've been very sensitive as a leadership team with everybody that we work with. We've been able since we've been there, 4 out of the 5 positions that were management level positions, we've been able to promote from within. And I would tell you, in
that's
some
wonderful.
cases, we knew that those people would take additional development, but we were willing to make those commitments. So I think they're seeing the fruits of our labors versus
Yes.
I think when I showed up my first time, they're like, "Who is this guy?" And is
Yeah.
this, another person going to take advantage of us? So it's been a
Yeah.
great process.
Well, I think the humility to understand that they're reticent to trust because people have not been trustworthy, and so
Yeah.
understanding the wounding and giving grace to it and being like, "Yeah, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility to now build this trust." I think that's really a great act of generosity and understanding and sensitivity that I think I really respect. I'm sure that, like you said, people can quickly see the difference between virtue signaling and the real deal. It just time tells. There's somebody asked me once because somebody said, "Man, you gain trust with people so quickly. How do you do that?" And I was like, "I think just being trustworthy." Like I was like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think I think I'm just really for them. I think it's the truth. So the truth kind of wins out over time. But I really appreciate what you're saying. And so in your personal through those years of working in the industry and with your private equity background, did you have some liquidity events? Did you have some big exits? And you're now like you're able to have. The reason I ask is like, are you in a financial purview that like that's why you were able to just make it all about the mission? Does that make sense? Or was it more of like you got tired with just making it about transaction? Or what was the kind of the impetus for you to be like, this is what I want to do, this is what's up next for me?
Yeah. So this home that we have in Park City, we call this the RG Berry House. I worked for RG Berry Corporation. We did have a transaction. We did have a liquidity event. And so we do call this the RG Berry House.
Cool.
Um, and I think it's one of those things that you go through your career. I've been very blessed and very fortunate, been with amazing companies. We were able to be very successful. I had amazing mentors. And it just
Mhm.
came to a point in my career where I just kind of sat there and said, look, I got about 5 to 7 years left, right?
Yeah.
And I can go and make another great turnaround and make a big buck and everything else. But I've done that multiple times. And this was, can I really do something that makes an impact and makes a difference? And use my expertise in the field that I'm from and actually make a difference. And that's what got me here at the end of the day is
Cool.
it actually did those 2 things for me.
That's incredible. I love that. And you have, where are you with your family cycle? You got kids and happily married, and I think I can hear
So
little kids in the background even.
yeah, so I'm very lucky. I'm happily married of 37 years. You got to realize my oldest kid is 34. So the kids you're hearing are grandkids.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh.
and that's one of those things, I guess, working from home. They just flew in from Wisconsin. So we're gonna take them for a week of skiing out here. But
Oh, but
those are the
snow's
fun things.
incredible right now, right? The snow's incredible right now. So you could do
Best I've ever seen it. It doesn't get any better.
That's so fun. That's so fun. I really appreciate all that you've shared and kind of, your sensitivities and insights and heart. I mean, I'm obsessed with your guys' product. I'm definitely gonna like right now I live in Hawaii. We basically don't wear shoes, but whatever. but but I honestly do. I love what you guys do. And I would think that more and more people are going to hear about your brand and the heart of it. People are going to want to support that mission because it's so sincere. And so they're so lucky to have you and your leadership. So anything you want to share kind of as the last little bit, I know we just have a few minutes left. Is there anything else
Sure.
you want to share about what you're learning or what you're up to or?
I would tell you the one thing that I've kind of seen through my career is, the different changes that companies go through. But the big one that most companies are really, you just hear all the noise on is about DEI, right? It's all about diversity,
Mhm,
equity, inclusion.
mhm.
And what I've found over my career, and it doesn't matter whether I'm working out of California, out of New York, out of Maine, out of Michigan, it doesn't matter, is it's great to talk about diversity. It's great to talk about equity. But quite frankly, if you don't have a culture that you've built in the company that has inclusion, the diversity and equity will come. But if you don't have inclusion, those will never come. And so
Right.
one of the things that we focus on is even though we're an indigenous based company, we're inclusive of everyone. I just interviewed a person today that's going to be our new business intelligence director, and he's from Nigeria. Um,
Wow.
and, and he's got an amazing background technology wise. But the one thing that we try to make sure we do is that when people come into the company, whether they're coming in through virtually, whether they're coming in through remote or coming in actually being at the office, we want to make sure that it's extremely inclusive. And that was probably one of the hardest things to get this group to understand is that I didn't care if they were black, white, red, green, yellow. I don't care. I'm more about the character of the person, more about the talents of the person and getting them familiar with that. Now, just realize we have a indigenous first hiring policy, which says if we have two candidates that are equal, we will hire the indigenous person first. But if we have someone that, um, has a certain talent that somebody else doesn't, we will hire them, of course, as well. So I think this idea of inclusion, I just keep hearing everyone talk about DEI. And the
Mhm,
reason why people are having problems with DEI is because the companies aren't inclusive.
mm,
Um, they're not reaching out to people. Um,
mhm.
and I've seen the social media uh, really retract on this. When Black Lives Matters was happening, you know, when I was at Wolverine, Merrill hiking boots came out publicly and said, we support Black Lives Matter and it's important to us. And then, of course, someone on social media looked it up and said, wow, only 2% of your whole employee base are Black. How much do you really care about BLM? And so today, I think you have to be real. I think you have to be authentic. And I think you have to be inclusive because if you're not inclusive, you are going to miss out on amazing opportunities. In my
Yeah.
lifetime, I've worked with great artists, but some of the indigenous artists that we're working with now are just amazing people.
Oh,
Um,
wow, yeah.
if we wouldn't have been inclusive, we wouldn't have been able to benefit from that.
Well, Greg, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on the show, and we will put some links in the podcast
Sure.
where people can find out, how to buy your product and connect, and really appreciate you. Thanks
Okay.
again.
Take care.
Do you need help with the next steps for your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call to schedule a complimentary consultation at 801 566 5058 or visit their website at www.capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.